but just because you think like, wow, they committed this perfect crime and they got away with it. And the fact is that they did. So what are you going to do? Good afternoon, and thank you for joining me for yet another episode of the Everyman Movie Review. We're staying on a kind of a consistent theme from the last episode where we talked about the terror report. This week we are going to talk about the Laundromat. And this is not about a laundromat. It's about a place where money gets laundered. That's the simplest way to talk about it. This film is also from back in the fall of 2019 and came to streaming earlier this year. It is available online. You'll find a link down below where you can watch it if you choose to, if it sounds like it's for you. But before we get too far into the review, let's get through the pleasantries, shall we? The Laundromat was directed by Steven Soderbergh. The screenplay was also written by Scott Z. Burns, the writer of The Terror Report. And it's, of course, based on the book The Laundromat by Jake Bernstein. It is starring an ensemble cast of a lot of characters, but let's say namely Gary Oldman as Jurgen Mossack, Antonio Banderas as Ramon Fonseca, and those two are the Mossack Fonseca that's going to be the center of this entire movie. Meryl Streep as Ellen Martin, the character that kind of gets us into the story. James Cromwell as Joe Martin. David Schwimmer as Matthew Quirk. Marcia Stephanie Blake as Vincel Boncamper. Jeffrey Wright as Malchus Boncamper, Sharon Stone as Hannah, Larry Wilmore as Jeff, and Will Forte and Chris Parnell have a little guest spot as some doomed gringos. As I said, though, it is an ensemble cast, and there are a lot of fantastic actors in this, none of whom are really the center. Even though it's about Mossack Fonseca, those guys are central roles, but they're not the roles. Ellen Martin gets us into it, but Meryl Streep doesn't play a huge role in it. There are a lot of people who play really important roles, and there are a lot of actors who you've never heard of before, but it's a nice ensemble cast piece. And if you're not aware of what The Laundromat is, this is kind of the background. There was a scheme in Panama for very rich people to basically buy things that didn't exist and hide money in companies that didn't exist. And basically one law office, Mossack Fonseca, basically created company after company after company, shell companies that contain shell companies that contain shell companies in different countries around the world. And this was all to protect wealth from taxes. And this is how Jeffrey Epstein had money. This is how Bill Gates hides money. It's how Mark Zuckerberg hides money. It's how all of the richest people you know, the people who run every big corporation in the world, were and probably are hiding money. But Ellen Martin gets us into this story as Meryl Streep. She is looking to file an insurance claim, and come to find out, the insurance company that she bought an interest in doesn't actually exist in the way she thinks it does, and maybe she's not covered. And this leads her down a rabbit hole with her attorney of trying to figure out who will pay her for this insurance claim. But what she finds is not an insurance company. What she finds is a money laundering scheme centered in Panama. And basically, at the point that we realize that it's a bit of a scheme, we cut away from Ellen, and now we are just seeing all the players. There are drug lords in Colombia. There is an entire financial setup in East Asia, China, Japan, in the Philippines. There is things happening in Panama, over in Europe. There are all of these people who are getting rich themselves by helping the wealthy hide their wealth. And I always think of Chris Rock when I think of the levels of wealth. As somebody who is middle income, I will look at somebody who is like rich and basically say, you might be levels of rich, but you guys are way richer than me. But there are levels to be rich. Shaq is rich. The guy who signs Shaq's checks, he is wealthy. There are sports players who make tens of millions of dollars a year just from their check from their sports team. But there's somebody who owns that team, and that person is wealthy. You may have stock in a company like Tesla, and that stock has probably become super valuable over the last few months, but Elon Musk, he's wealthy. He owns more stock than everybody. And the same for Mark Zuckerberg, for Jeff Bezos, for not just the super wealthy though. It's easy to think of the super wealthy and we know those names, but there are people who you've never really heard of before who are that wealthy. Sumner Redstone is a name that came into public parlance because of the struggle with his daughter over control of CBS Viacom. But did you know who Sumner Redstone was before that? No? Because he's one of the wealthiest men in the world. Warren Buffett is super wealthy, and he's just known for being like yeah, I take advantage of all these things. You should really shut these loopholes. I wouldn't take advantage of them if they weren't there. Donald Trump is not wealthy. Turns out he's just really good at the shell game that makes people look wealthy. But there is a list of probably a few thousand people who have the kind of wealth that justifies the work that Mossack Fonseca was doing in Panama. And there were some very, I'm sure, not well paid reporters and newspapermen who dug into this investigation and uncovered what would later be called the Panama Papers. Now, you may remember the Panama Papers from a few years ago. It made a blip just briefly on national news, and then it was gone. Maybe because the national news companies are controlled by those wealthy people. But after disappearing off the national news, nothing really happened. We learned that everyone from the Queen to, again, Jeffrey Epstein, was hiding wealth in these shell companies in Panama and around the world, and then we did exactly nothing about it. And The Laundromat has that in common with movies like The Big Short or Spotlight, where they are really well-made movies with fantastic casts that point out that this thing happened in real life, and in real life, nothing happened because of it. The Big Short basically ends with this fake ending where they say, and then everybody went to jail. Just kidding. The only person who actually did any jail time was an Icelandic guy who took the fall for his company, and the higher-ups at his company didn't suffer any consequences. Very similar to that, the Panama Papers revealed that all of this was going on, and exactly nothing happened because of it. And I was thinking about doing a spoilers for this episode, but I mean, in the end, you're either going to watch it or you're not. This is even more of a documentary style Spotlight or a Big Short style movie than the Terror Report was, and so there's not a lot that can be given away. If you didn't know that there was a huge controversy and that happened, well, that's a spoiler, but you should really check out the news about that. But I mentioned the ending of The Big Short because this movie has a very similar ending. There is a woman who's working at Mossack Fonseca, and she essentially is escalated from a secretary to the owner and operator of many corporations, 150, I think, or something like that. And she is just a secretary. She had no qualifications, but they needed names. They needed people to sign for all of these corporations to be on all of these boards. And so everyone there, the janitor, the guy who stocks the minibar, everybody was an owner in all these companies. And she actually, at the end of the movie, kind of gets out of the office right as the authorities are coming in, and she walks through this big open room and then whips off her wig, and it's Meryl Streep. She has been undercover. Although Ellen Martin didn't go undercover. It's basically this movie, the Laundromat's way of doing The Big Short ending, which is like, hey, so just so you know, this was in the national news for like a day, and it meant millions, maybe billions of revenue lost for companies around the world, for governments around the world, and nothing happened. Nobody went to jail. We just basically said, let's call it even. And that made it very upsetting. But if we're getting around to a recommendation, it basically comes down to, did you like The Big Short? Did you watch The Big Short? Did you say, not really for me? Did you watch Spotlight for the same reasons? Did you check out the Terror Report after last week's review? Well, if you liked those things, you're probably going to like The Laundromat. It's a little drier than Terror Report. It's funnier than The Big Short, mainly because The Big Short infected most of us personally, and Panama Papers didn't really do that. But I think they also just took an interesting tact with the way that they told the story, and it stayed interesting. They're hopping around. Your character that you're with meets somebody else, and then it's basically a handoff. We're passed off to this next person, and we see what they are in this laundromat of money. But it's not going to be for everybody. If you like 3-act structure, if you like movies that have a happy ending especially, but if you like movies that are kind of clear and concise and short, this is not going to be it. Laundromat's over 2 hours, just like Terror Report, and it's upsetting emotionally. Not because it shows any violence or not because there's cursing, although there is a little bit of cursing and a little bit of violence, but just because you think like, wow, they committed this perfect crime and they got away with it. And the fact is that they did. So what are you going to do? But I think if you like these based on a true story, financial crimes, like the world is all corrupt kind of movies, you're going to love this one. I enjoyed it a lot because I do like those politically based, politically motivated movies, but they're not for everybody. So much like the Terror Report, I can't give it a full-throated, yes, you should go see it. But for the certain viewer, the kind that I just described, you're going to really enjoy it. For everybody else, skip it and move on to something else. Maybe one of the many movies that I've reviewed on the channel. And you can still find all of those videos up here. You'll be able to find them into the future, even once these episodes end on December 31st. But if you do want to watch it, you can find a link down below to where you can find it on streaming. You can also find links to the social media for the Everyman Movie Reviews. If you're looking for my stuff, at Robert N. Cheek on all social networks, and robertncheek.com, where you can stay up to date with all the projects that I'm working on, including the stuff that I'll be working on in the future. But thank you for checking out this episode of the Everyman Movie Reviews. We will be back next Thursday with a brand new episode, so make sure you check that out. Until then, please take care of yourselves and each other. Have a great week.